All right, I wanted to do a separate video that just showed you some of the comparisons between Lamarck and Darwin, because that's a key part of this unit, is how their two theories and their ideas are slightly different. So let's start with Lamarck. Remember that Lamarck believed that individuals could change. So he said if there was a species, and that could be human, that could be animal, that could be whatever. But if there was a species that wanted to do something, or let's say they wanted to be fast. Let's say this animal needs to be faster. Well, Lamarck said if it wanted to be faster, it would want it bad enough. It would start to change, and that animal would start to get, buffer legs. It's a buff stick dog. Yeah, whatever. Oh, let me switch so you can see my buff stick dog. It would start to get bigger muscles. It would start to develop traits that made it faster. The individual could change. Now we know that individuals can change. Like if I go to the gym more, I'm gonna get stronger. If I run more, I'm gonna get faster. But then Lamarck also said that then if that dog had puppies, that they would be little buff puppies, and that trait would get passed on to others. So the key here is Lamarck is saying that this dog right here is evolving, and that once it has slightly evolved, then it passes that on to its children, and they can slightly evolve. So Lamarck was all about the individual. This species, that dog, is evolving. It is changing, right? That's the key difference, at least for me, what I think. Now I'm oversimplifying this a little bit too, but that was the key. That individual was changing. All right. Darwin's ideas were a little bit different. He didn't talk about individuals changing. He talked about a slow, gradual change over a long period of time. So let's say that you had some dogs, a litter of pups or whatever, and in that litter there was variation. There were some that were smaller, there were some that were bigger, there were some that were faster, there were some that were slower, whatever it might be. Darwin said that variation just meant like the individual wasn't changing. That's just their genetic lottery. They were born that way. They were just different. Now, what if along the way, though, because of, let's say, the food supply that they're working on, only 2 of these 4 dogs get to survive? And let's say that this one with a weird leg, he dies, and this little short one, he can't keep up, he can't catch food, so he starves and he dies. These 2 are the ones that, out of that population, survive. That means in the next generation, it's less likely to have small dog because the small dog didn't survive to pass on its genes. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't still genes for small dogs in this other population, but it means in the next generation, maybe there's less small dogs and there's more bigger and faster dogs, but their necks apparently are getting very long. I'm going to change that. And then in the next generation, maybe there's another trait that maybe it's a really cold winter and this dog didn't have very long fur and it freezes to death. So over time, it's not that individuals change. Evolution is happening because if you compared this population to, let's say, 4 generations down, there's going to be some differences. And those differences are probably going to be, in 4 generations, relatively small, right? A little bit taller or a little bit longer fur or something like that. Not necessarily a new species. But now take that same idea and spread it over thousands and maybe even millions of years and generations, and you can start to think about the whale example that we talked about. Like maybe you had an animal that had a fin, and maybe all of a sudden there was another animal that had a little bit smaller fin, but it kind of had like toes on it. And maybe that gave it an advantage to like come up on land or something. And then maybe some of its offspring had a little bit bigger toes and less fin. And maybe like whatever it is. But if you think about long periods of time, eventually maybe a fin turned into a foot, or maybe it was opposite. Maybe that animal moved from the land to the water, like in the case of the whales. Maybe it was a foot that turned into a fin. Maybe it was a tail that became important. Maybe it was a back leg that eventually disappeared and became a vestigial pelvis with a big tail. That's Darwin's theory. It's not that individuals change. That animal right there is not changing. It didn't start its life like this and end its life like that. It can't do that. The animal itself can't change. But over time, maybe slight variation leads to a very slow, gradual change in a population where this becomes more prevalent. That's the difference between Lamarck and Darwin. Lamarck said the individual is changing and he's passing that on to his offspring. Darwin was saying, no, it's just variation. Everything's different. And the ones that survive passed on their traits, and the ones who don't can't. And over time, the population is going to change just because those are the traits that happen to get passed on. And we're going to talk about where some new traits might come in the next section. But for now, let's just look at how certain traits get passed on and how certain traits don't. And that's kind of the key of where Darwin's understanding varied from Lamarck's. So hopefully that makes sense. If there's anything there that's unclear or you're unsure about, let me know. I'll try to go through it again, give you a better example. But that's the big distinction there. Lamarck is about the individual, and Darwin was a gradual change in the population, in the species, not in the individual. Okay? All right, see you on the next one.